And welcome. My name is Ashley Hayes, and I am the Senior Manager for Strategy and Operations for Community Development and Programs at Blue Star Families. Welcome to Blue Star Families Network's live on-demand webinars, where we're providing our military families with personal and professional development opportunities from around the world, no matter where you are stationed. And I actually see that we are all over the United States, which is really amazing. I am a military spouse myself. My husband's stationed aboard Camp Lejeune here in sunny Jacksonville, North Carolina. I want to go over just a few housekeeping items before we get started. I want to introduce to you a couple of Blue Star Family staff members. Liz Jones is here. She's our careers coordinator and the wonderful woman behind executing this great program for our team. And also we have our Senior Manager of Technology, Kelly Babbs, on the webinar as well to assist us if anything goes wrong with technology, because we all know that's bound to happen. But she will also be helping to get our voice heard throughout the webinar. So we hope that you want to, jump on, interact, interrupt, engage with us today, and don't hesitate. Please feel free to jump in at any time. You can either do this by typing in the chat box and letting us know your question through there, or feel free to raise your hand and we will promote you to a panelist where you are free to ask your question to Laura personally. Please note, when I am changing you from a viewer to a panelist, there is about a half a second delay. So please don't be concerned that I've kicked you off. Without further ado, we are excited to have Laura Weinsider with us today. She is the Talent Acquisition Manager for Best Buy, and she'll be talking to us about interviewing tips for military spouses. So Laura, I'll unmute you, and if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and take it away.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Hey, everyone. So I've been a professional recruiter now for, I would say, about 10 years. I've been with Best Buy for 2.5 years now. And about a year ago, I was kind of asked/told to join an internal military recruiting committee that we were creating. And I can't even tell you how awesome the journey has been since we started. It's really been developing and going in a great direction. And I love that we're trying to support the military and their families as much as we are. And I'm just really happy to be a part of that. All right, great. So today, like Ashley mentioned, we are going to be going through some interviewing tips. I hope that you guys find this really engaging. Please definitely feel free to jump in and ask questions. We love participation. So if you have questions, comments, anything like that, definitely feel free to share. Sorry, I was a little delayed on the slide. So this is me and my kids and Ashley and her kids. I forgot I was moving the slides. So we're going to start off by talking about some interviewing best practices. And we are going to go into how to have a successful interview, body language and what it means, some sample questions to ask at the end of the interview, what happens after interviews are complete, how to answer some tough questions. And then if you do have further questions at the end of the presentation, I would be more than happy to answer those. So a lot of companies do their first round of interviews via telephone. This is especially applicable if you are applying to jobs in a state or location that's not easily commutable. So some tips around this are to dress up, stand up, smile, sound confident but not cocky, and expect silences. And some of these might sound a little bit silly because you're on the phone. So why would you need to dress up? And the reason behind this is because if you think about it, if you're sitting at home on your couch in your PJs, you're going to be very relaxed, and you're, going to be kind of not necessarily totally enthusiastic and into what you're talking about. But if you dress up and you get up and, you're kind of ready for your day and ready to go, that's going to make you feel better and more energized for the interview. Standing up is also suggested because when you stand up, it stretches you out and it allows you to be more vocal and come across stronger in how you're speaking. We don't recommend that you walk back and forth or, that you do laps, because then you'll start to become out of breath, and then they may not be able to understand you. Smiling is a huge thing. People can definitely hear when you smile when you talk. So it helps you to share your passion. It helps you show your passion and your enthusiasm around what you're speaking about. Still confident but not cocky. This is really important because you do want to come across as, excited and confident about what you are speaking about, but you also want to make sure you draw that line and don't come across as sounding cocky or, over bragging what you've done. And then expect silences. We as interviewers are taking notes on your conversation. Sometimes you speak a lot faster than we can write or type. So we will be taking notes, and we'll expect the same from you. It's completely okay for you to take notes as well. I have a lot of people who like to write down the question as I'm asking it so they can really think through how they're going to answer. So silences on both ends are definitely expected and okay. And don't feel like you need to fill up that silence with talk. Sometimes if you do that, you end up speaking in circles, and it makes us lose track of our thought around what you had just answered. So while interviewing, make sure that you're specific. Start by practicing your answers. Brief yes and no responses are not recommended. It doesn't do anything to support what you're saying. Obviously, a question like, are you comfortable commuting to work every day? That's a simple yes or no question. But when it's asking about your experience, make sure that you are really, going into detail about what they're looking for. Paint visual pictures with your words by telling stories that demonstrate results you've achieved. So in a phone interview, they cannot see your body language. They cannot see your facial expressions. So you have to make sure that you are drawing them in with the words that you're telling, and that when you're talking about certain scenarios and certain situations, they can envision those situations and how you've reacted. So it's really good to be nice and descriptive around the results that you've achieved. Use answers that express the who, what, where, when, how, and why. You want to make sure you give a full picture of the scenario. You don't want to leave portions out, even if it's a negative outcome or something like that. We sometimes like to hear about the negative and what you learn from that, and that you have grown from that in the past. Everybody makes mistakes, so don't be afraid to speak about those mistakes and what you learned from them. The more you prepare, the better your results will be. So, going into an interview, make sure you relook over your resume, understand the points that you have listed out, make any notes on your resume of things that may not be on there that you might want to talk about or that you anticipate may come up when it comes to your experience and background. Look at the job description, see what you can highlight on your resume, and always have a copy of your resume handy when you are interviewing, because we may ask you a question about something specific and you may not remember off of the top of your head every bullet point you have listed. So you want to make sure that you're prepared and you can answer and refer to your resume quickly if needed. Practice makes perfect. Don't be afraid to apply to multiple positions, and keep track of where you're applying and the positions you're applying for. The more you interview, the more comfortable you'll be, and the stronger you'll come out during those interviews. You don't want to just apply to 1 or 2 positions and hope one of those comes through. You want to kind of have that diversity in your applications. And then one of the worst things that you can do is apply for a position and then forget the position that you applied for, and talk about something completely different, or have no idea. So it's always good to kind of keep track of what you're applying for. If there's a hiring manager listed, put their name down, the company name, the job, and even if you can save the job description, because what'll happen sometimes is people will save it as a favorites in their browser, and then try and go back to it while we're interviewing, but the job is closed, so it won't load anymore. So then they're not as clear on the job description. So if you can copy and paste it or something like that, that would be an ideal situation. And make sure yes.
I feel like as a military family, we use a lot of acronyms like, if you're a family readiness assistant, that's what they call it in the Marine Corps, a FRA. How do we best address those during an interview?
Sure. So the first thing that you want to do, you can use the acronym at first, but make sure right after you follow up with what that means. You will probably even want to explain what it is, because I don't know what that is. So you should go off of the assumption that whoever you're speaking to doesn't know what those acronyms mean. And then, same thing on your resume, just make sure that they're spelled out on your resume. Once you define them once or twice, if the acronym does come up again, you can just use the acronym. That's fine. Good question. Great. So thinking back to the slide that we just talked about, where you're going to explain the who, what, when, where, how, and why, we use a method called the STAR method. And it's basically around how to be more specific in your answers. When we are asking questions about specific situations and we want to see how you reacted, how you participated, and what the outcome was, this is the method that we listen for. So the ST is a situation or task. So what was the situation or task that needed to be accomplished or addressed? Describe a specific situation or task. Try not to generalize. You want to be sure that you give enough detail so that the interviewer can understand and once again visualize that situation. It can be from a previous job, a volunteer experience, really any relevant event to what you guys are talking about and what the question is. The A is the action you took. So what did you do to either get to that specific goal or to meet that specific need? Even if you're discussing a group project or effort, you want to describe your part. I wouldn't say completely leave the group out, but you want to highlight what you did and not what the whole group did, because we don't really care what the whole group did. We're looking to see what you did in that specific situation. And then what was the end result? What happened? How did the event end? What did you accomplish? And what did you learn? I think that, it's really important to make sure you give that whole picture. Okay, so a question just came through and it said, I am a volunteer lead coordinator for the Surprise Veteran Job Club. As a military spouse, I hear pros and cons about sharing the fact that you are a military spouse with the interviewer. What are your thoughts? I definitely think you want to be honest about that. It's going to come up at some point or another. But I would wait until it may be something relevant. So if you're answering a question around, a job something that you coordinated, or something that relates to your current position, your current volunteer work, it's going to come up. And I think that honesty is the best policy. So I would definitely share that you are a military spouse with the interviewer. and just be ready to kind of answer some of those hard questions, which we'll get to later on in the presentation. But I definitely think that honesty is the best policy. And, I think more and more companies are open to the military and to military spouses. So I think that, as you go through the process, you'll get more comfortable in sharing that fact. Another good question. All right. So once you go through the phone interview and you get to that next part, which, may be an in-person interview, may be virtual, depending on the location of the job. But we're going to just go off of the assumption that it is an in-person interview. When you are getting scheduled for that interview, I always recommend that you ask how many people will be in attendance in that interview, or how many people do they anticipate you meeting with, so that you can bring multiple copies of your resume. You always want to have enough copies of your resume for not only everybody you're going to be meeting with, but again, for yourself, that you can refer to it as you're speaking to them. It doesn't make you look bad, or it doesn't, come across as strange if you have your resume in front of you for reference. People know that most people are very nervous during interviews. It will also ensure that you're answering the questions properly. And you're just using it as a point of reference to kind of get your mind going and start thinking. So make sure that you are bringing multiple copies of your resume. Be actively engaged throughout the interview. If you're interviewing with one person, you want to maintain eye contact with them. You want to be engaged in the conversation. If you are interviewing with multiple people, you want to directly address the person that asked the question or that's speaking. And you want to kind of engage your eye contact with the panel as a whole. If it comes organically and naturally, try and use their names in your answers as well. But if it feels awkward, or if it's going to feel forced, don't worry about using their names. And then, of course, dress for the part. You want to go in and make that first impression and make sure that, you are there to win. You're showing up to get this job. So if your resume looks great and your background looks great and everything goes well over the phone interview, and then you come in and you don't look professional and you don't look put together for the interview, that's gonna, kind of hurt your chances of getting the role in the end. And then don't assume you have the job. As great as it is to feel like you knocked it out of the park with the interview, you did great, there's nobody better than you. You never know who you're going up against. You never know who else they are interviewing. You also don't know some of the other specifics that they might be looking for. So go in there with the confidence, go out with the confidence, but don't assume you have the position. All right. So, again, we're going to talk about body language. So think about body language. What are some of the most common things that you do, and how will somebody interpret that during an interview? It says a lot about you. It's something to be aware of to ensure that you're making the best impression and coming across as confident. A personal story that I have for this is not necessarily when it comes to interviewing, but I'm sure I did the same thing during interviews. When I got one of my previous jobs in sales, we went to one of my very first client meetings, and I was super excited and super nervous. And my boss was with me, and I was talking to the potential person that I was selling to about, what we had to offer, some of the candidates that I had that I knew that might be good for his position. And I was just super excited, and we got out of there, and I asked my manager, I said, so how did I do? I was really nervous. I was really excited. How did I do? He's like, well, what you were saying was great. Like, you hit all of the points, you addressed his concerns. He said, but I was afraid you were going to punch him in the face. And I was like, oh my goodness, what do you mean? He said, you use your hands to talk, but you were so expressive with it that there were a few times where you came within an inch of his face, and I was just mortified. So it's just something that I know about myself that, I will probably never stop talking with my hands. It's just what I do. But now I'm more conscious of it, so I can make sure that I'm not over the top with it. I can make sure that, yes, I'm using my hands to help express myself, but not in a violent way. So that's just, kind of a fun little tip. Does anybody have anything off of the top of their head that they know they do, or that they've been told that they do that might seem a little off to somebody if you're interviewing? The nervous chuckle. Yep. I do. I think everyone probably does that, right? You get nervous and you just start laughing.
I know I struggle with saying
Yeah.
I have lots of great words in my vocabulary, but I get it and it's my time filler.
Yeah.
So
it helps you think.
Yeah, but I have to focus on just being silent and thinking and not saying
Yeah. Yeah. All right, great. So it's just something to think about, moving, and there's the moving forward. That was good timing. All right. So we call this words, music, and dance. So a hiring manager's decision of you is based on their full impression of you. So words are the actual words that we say. Music is the way that we say it, and dance is our body language and facial expressions. So if you had to think about it, what would you say, if you guys can just shout it out or chat it out, which do you think is the most important when you are meeting with a hiring manager? Your words, your music, or your dance? All are important. Yep, that's for sure.
April mentioned dance.
Dance. Okay. So let's put it into this perspective. So research shows that we make 6 important decisions about each other in the first 7 seconds of meeting. So think about that. You have 7 seconds where you make 6 decisions about somebody. So if you think about that and then you look at the words, music, and dance, obviously dance is going to be in those first 7 seconds. That's going to be the biggest driver. You may say hello within those 7 seconds, but our appearance, our body language, and facial expression are what is looked at. And the research shows that those 6 things include our education level, trustworthiness, believe it or not, credibility, competence, honesty, and believability. So, if you come across as confident, well put together, you have a smile on your face, you just look engaged and happy, it's going to say a lot in your first meeting with a hiring manager. So this is just a fun little slide that we like to show around words, music, and dance, and different statistics and everything like that. So common nonverbal mistakes made during job interviews. Failure to make eye contact is one of the biggest ones. You want to make sure that you are making eye contact. It shows that you're engaged. It shows that you're confident. You do want to break that eye contact every now and then, because then it gets into the creepy stare zone. So you do want to have, that eye contact, but you can draw your limits. Have little knowledge of the company is number 2. You want to research your company. You want to make sure you know who they are and what they're talking about. A perfect example of this is somebody that I interviewed just before I jumped on here. I was interviewing for one of our brands, and he started talking about a completely different brand. And so I stopped him And I said, you know, this position is for XYZ brand. And he's like, oh, well, I was wondering what that was. Can you tell me about it? Yes, I can tell you about it. But if you were wondering, you probably should have Googled it. So, you know, even just basic research, we're not asking you to know everything about the company, but at least know the brand or the department or what the company does before you go into the interview. Not smiling, having bad posture, fidgeting too much, a weak handshake, playing with your hair, touching your face, crossing their arms over their chest, and using too many hand gestures. Then again, the statistics show that first impressions are determined by those different things, and then things that have an impact on those first impressions. All right, great. So the next thing that we are going to get into is we are going to talk about how to answer some tough questions as a military spouse. So if you want to share, that would be amazing. You can chat, you can verbally jump in. What questions have you been asked during an interview that have been challenging to answer as a military spouse?
Laura, this is to April's point earlier.
Yep.
You know, when they ask you, you know, what has brought you to the area, or, you know, why did you move here? You know, should you be honest in saying that you're a military spouse and that's why you've moved here? Or how should you respond to that?
Yeah, because I think that, you know, so it's a tough question, obviously. And I think that, you know, saying that you are a military spouse helps a bit. Because if it seems like you've just moved around or you've job hopped and you've been from here to there just because, it doesn't look good for you. But if you're a military spouse and it shows that, yes, you have moved a lot, but you still have that stability, and you've moved because the need has been there and that's something that you've had to do, that's a completely different situation. You know, of course, the company is going to worry about that relocation. Is that going to happen to us if you're hired this job? You know, if you know that you're going to be stationed in one area for a specific amount of time, share that. If, you know, you're asked about how long you plan to be stationed in that state and you're not sure, you can say the hope is X amount of years, whether it be 3 years, 5 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, you know, whatever the case may be, possibly longer. You know, that kind of removes any falsehood from your statement, but you're also not necessarily committing to a certain amount of time. So, you know, if they ask where you see yourself in 5 years, talk about your career goals as they relate to the company and the role, because your ideal situation, I'm sure, would be to be within that same company and role. So talk about those goals and the company itself, not about the location, family-related status, or anything unrelated, education plan, or anything like that. Keep it focused in the moment in terms of the company you're interviewing for. And then I did see something come through.
Yeah, April brings up a good
point.
Go ahead.
Yep, so April said, you know, biggest concerns are dealing with gaps in employment and having to change career focus due to lack of opportunities in your career field at your current location. So again, you know, you want to stay focused in the now. So you may have, you know, let's say you were a biologist in one state and you move to another state and there's just no biology job. So you take an administrative assistant job or something like that, whatever the case is, that's completely unrelated. Then you move somewhere else, and again, you're trying to get back into your previous field. What you want to focus on is talk about your previous experience and then think about what you've been doing since you left that previous role that is relevant to the role you're applying for. You know, so if, let's say, you were a professional event coordinator and you left that job and you moved to a location and there were no event coordination jobs, so you stayed as a stay-at-home parent. Think about what you do as a stay-at-home parent that's relevant to event coordination. I would say everyday life, right? So you have to figure out what time you need to get the kids up to eat breakfast, to get out the door to school, whatever other activities, if you're part of the PTA or you're planning play dates, anything like that goes along with event coordination. So tie that back in. You can even list that on your resume. You can even list that you're a stay-at-home parent, and these are some of the relevant tasks that you do to the position you're applying for. You want to create a targeted resume that way when they see it and they're considering you for an interview, they can flat out see why they're considering you for that. And again, be as upfront as possible with it. Yes, I went from being, an event coordinator to a receptionist, but these are the things that I've done in my reception role that can apply to an event coordinator position. This is what I've learned that will help me be successful in this role. And it really will allow you to kind of show that you've done your homework, you've thought about it, and although it's not in your direct field, you have figured out a way to make your skills and your talents relevant to that field should you choose to go back to it. Does that answer the question? Great. Any other questions that you would like to chat about? Or are we ready to move on? Okay, so another question that just came through is, when you have to take a break from the workforce to take care of your family, death in the family, etc. Again, I think this can go along with the previous answer. Addressing those gaps, you want to be honest, obviously, that you did take time off. And you want to make sure that you tie it back to how it relates to the job. I'm just trying to think of a personal story, because the sad part is I've never really taken a lot of time off. But what I can say is, when I had my first daughter, for example, I took an extended period of maternity leave. And when I came back from maternity leave, I came back to my previous position. But at the same time, some things had changed there. So I was looking for a new role. And the new role one of the new roles that I was applying for was a little bit different. There was a lot more involvement in what I had to do in terms of selling and recruiting and kind of owning my whole business. So the question of time management came up. Because in my previous position, I had an admin who kind of helped me with my scheduling and helped me with the paperwork. But in this new role, I would have to do all of that by myself. So, I really had to think about what can I use to apply to this? How can I show that I have these time management skills? So what I did was I thought about, when I was out on maternity leave, how did I make sure that, I took care of my daughter to the full extent, but also got other things done that I wanted to get done. So, babies are not really on too much of a schedule, but they're still on their schedule. So you have to think about when they need to eat, when they need to nap. Are they going to start getting cranky if I'm out grocery shopping at 6 p.m.? Is that their bedtime? When do they need their bath? So that all comes into time management. And then, when I did go back to work, I had to then plan even further out. So I had to think about, okay, she eats at, 5 o'clock and then again at 8 o'clock. So I need to be at work by 8:30. So what do I have to change in my routine to make it work? Also figuring out how much food to send to the babysitter. So all of those things tied into the time management portion that they were looking for and the organizational portion that they were looking for. So, if you're taking care of your family member, think about how you really have to plan your day out to make it work for everyone. to make sure that, you are spending your time in the best way possible. A death in the family, if you're the primary person taking care of those arrangements, there's a lot that goes into that. So, just coordinating with the different people that need to be involved, making sure that everything gets taken care of and everything's communicated properly so it goes off without a hitch, is really important. So, just kind of taking a step back and thinking about those things that you may not think are relevant may end up being more relevant than you even realize.
Laura, in regards to taking time off, like taking a break from the workforce for a death in the family, should you be sharing that should you be sharing that personal information and that's why you took a break? Or, and Anna just came back and said, is it okay to share these personal circumstances? I guess that's the next question.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if I misinterpreted that question the first time. It's not necessarily relevant. If you feel that it's relevant to say, oh, well, I took time off because of a death in the family, then you can. But don't feel like you're obligated to. You can say, due to personal circumstances, I took some time off. But during that time off, these are some of the things that I did that I feel will help me in this role. So it's really up to your comfort level. You're welcome. All right, great. Any other questions we want to address?
Laura,
yes.
Answer the where do you see yourself in 5 years as a military spouse? I mean, the honest answer is I have no idea.
Yeah. So, you can say, in 5 years, I would like to see myself doing X, Y, Z. And like I mentioned before, keep it within the company and the role that you're interviewing for. Because I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would like to see yourself in that company or role in the next 5 years. So you can say that your hope would be to be in, a talent acquisition manager role with Best Buy in the next 5 years, within the Best Buy organization and within 5 years. Whatever the case may be, but try and take the focus off of, the unknown of 5 years and keep the focus on the known, that you're interviewing for this position now, you're interested in this position and this company, and that's where you would ideally like to be within 5 years.
Thank you.
Oh. All right, awesome. So we'll move on, and then if you do have more questions at the end, we can definitely go through those. All right, so another thing that is super important to do is asking questions at the end of the interview. Don't assume that you know everything about the position. The job description doesn't always share everything. It definitely, talks about what they're looking for and both of the soft and the hard skills, but not everything. So these are some sample questions that, are fairly general, but you can use them as a guideline and then make them more specific to the company you're applying for. Definitely feel free to write these down in a notebook or on a piece of paper to bring with you to the interview so that at the end of the interview, you don't forget. You can also, as you're going through the interview, if the interviewer does answer these questions as you're going along, you can just kind of check it off and write the answer down. So, you don't want to ask too many questions. I would say anywhere between like 3 and 5 questions are a good amount to ask. Make sure it doesn't come across that you're interviewing them. You don't want them to feel like they're in an interrogation, but make it more, friendly, kind of conversational. Ask a question about how they started in their roles, how long they've been with the company, If offered this position, what would your main focus be within the department? What are some of the other skills that you're looking for that, if this is a multi-location business, that are important for this specific location? You know, what are some of the tangible outcomes? Who has been the most successful in this role, and where did they come from? All of those things will give you a better understanding of, outside of the job description, what are they looking for, or what will I have to do within this position? So now,
I have a question. You know, at the end of the interview, is it appropriate to ask, you know, if they're willing to be flexible with our family circumstances, and you know, just understanding that, you know, if our husbands or wives are deploying, that we are a single parent essentially, and we need that flexibility to be able to meet our family's needs, but still show them that, you know, we are motivated and committed to the job in which we're interviewing for.
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily ask that during the interview. You can, if it'll make you feel more comfortable in the potential of moving forward. But you know, I would assume that it would have come up at some point or another that, you know, you are a military spouse in the interview process. So it's potentially something that's already on their mind. What I would do is hold off on that until you get to the point of getting an offer, or they're talking to you about the next steps or something like that. I think that, you know, you don't want to add any questions or doubt into their mind. Sell yourself first, and then worry about getting what you need and what you want after, if that makes sense. I think that, you know, if a company feels you are the best person for the role, they're going to work with you. So let them see that you are the best person, and then once you are set in their mind, then cross that bridge.
Great. It looks like Susie's asked, is it okay to ask if they've employed other military spouses?
You can ask that, but again, you know, I guess, what would the purpose of that question be? Just to see if they understand how military spouses need to be supported? Susie? Okay. Yeah, so you can ask that. You can ask about, you know, what their culture is like around the military in general, because that will say a lot. And then you can ask a little bit further about military spouses. You know, this is definitely a great question to ask. I, though, will tell you, most people probably won't even know. You know, it's not something we keep track of, spouse wise. It's something that we are looking into how we can keep track. But I don't think most companies do keep track of that, because it's not like a status that asks if you're a veteran or not. You can ask, but don't be surprised if they don't know. You're welcome. All right, great. So, so now now your interview is complete. So now what? So before leaving the interview, hiring managers should share the timeline with you, in terms of when they would like to get back to you, what the next steps are, and when they would like to hire somebody. But if they don't, definitely feel free to ask. Find out what that timeline looks like. That way you know what type of expectations to have. You know, during that timeline, it's okay to reach out if, you know, they say you'll hear back in a week and a half goes by and you don't hear back, it's fine to reach out to inquire, but don't be too pushy. Don't follow up every day. Don't call them a million times on the day that you're supposed to hear back. Don't send a ton of emails. Things happen, things come up, things change. So it's okay to show your eagerness. It's okay to show your interest, but don't go over the top, because then that might be misconstrued as desperate. And then, one thing that I always recommend is sending thank yous after the interviews. I would suggest sending a thank you email to the person who did the phone interview. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be anything in detail. Just, hey, thank you for your time. It was great hearing about the organization. Looking forward to hearing some more. When you do the in-person interview, I always suggest sending a written thank you to the hiring manager if you have their address. It's so few people send actual written thank yous that it'll help you stand out in their mind. And then anyone else on the panel, you can feel free to send an email thank you, just thanking them for their time. You have to remember they took time out of their day and out of their schedules to come and meet with you. So it's a great common courtesy that, like I said, doesn't happen often and goes a long way. One thing to remember about the thank you is don't use your thank you note as a time to address things that you didn't address during the interview. We all have the moment where we finish an interview and you're driving home and you're like, oh man, they asked me this and I forgot to tell them about this. I'll just write it in my thank you note. Don't do that. Because at that point, we've kind of already made our decision and we've already taken what you've said, and that one little change more than likely won't change our mind one way or the other. So just use this time to genuinely thank them for the interview. The one thing that I will say that kind of is the opposite to that is, if they have a question for you at the end, or if they leave you with something to think about, then you can address that in the thank you. An example of that is when I interviewed for this job, the hiring manager said to me, one thing that I need you to think about is that this is going to be extremely fast paced. It's going to always be on the go. You're going to be supporting people nationwide. So you have to be comfortable being flexible with your schedule. So it's something to think about. And she wasn't necessarily, asking me to answer that right then and there or even at all, but it was something I addressed in my thank you letter to her. Just because I wanted her to know that I did think about it. I heard what she said and I was on board with it. And it worked. I'm here. So that's okay, but answering a question that happened during the interview is something that I would avoid. All right. And then make sure if you are currently working, be confident that you nailed the interview and be excited about that, but make sure you stay engaged in your current position if you are working, because you never know what the outcome would be. And the worst thing that you could do would be to completely disengage from your current position and then let your performance slip and, God forbid, end up losing your job because of it, and then you not getting the other job. So make sure that you continue in your current position, if you have one, as if you weren't even interviewing. You also don't want to burn any bridges if you do get the job. All right, so just some best practices. Apply for positions that fit your skill sets. Make sure, when you are applying to a role, make sure you read the job description, because not every company has the same job title for every job. Best Buy is a great example of that. We call our Geek Squad team agents and deputy field marshals, and nobody knows what that is. So make sure to read your job description. Make sure that you're applying to positions that your experience really does fit in line with. And don't be afraid to have multiple resumes. If you're applying for, let's say, a position within the medical field and a position within the retail field, you don't want to use the same resume for those two positions because they're two very different fields. You want to make sure that your background and your experience is called out to each of those roles. Make sure if you have an objective on your resume that you are addressing the appropriate position and the right company. You don't want to use a generic one. We've gotten resumes here that says, hey, I'm really excited in the cashier position at Rite Aid. We're not Rite Aid and we're not hiring for cashiers. So, it just makes you look bad. Do as much research as you can on the position prior to the phone interview and the hiring manager if possible, so you can come prepared. A great way to do your research is on LinkedIn. Sometimes you can identify that hiring manager. So if you can, just kind of check out their background and see if there's anything that you have in common that you might be able to chat about.
Laura, we have a question.
Okay, so how long should the resume be, number of pages, and how far to go back time-wise? So I wouldn't let your resume go longer than 2 pages, only because after that it gets too wordy. You don't need a lot of detail under each job. One of the tips that I always give is, give enough information to draw interest, but not enough information for them to just look at your resume and make their decision. You want to intrigue the person looking at your resume to call you and ask you questions. And then time-wise, that's a tough one because I think it'll depend on what types of position you're applying for and how relevant your most recent experience is. So if you're staying within your same career field, I would say don't go any further back than what the basic requirements ask for. So if you're applying for a job that says you need to have at least 10 years of experience in XYZ, go back 10 years. If it's saying 5 years, go back 5 years. You want to try and make sure that when they see on your resume, they can see that you do have that experience. And then during the interview, if there's experience prior to what was on your on your resume, you can always share that during your interview. Make sure your resume is current, professional, and easy to read. Again, with the acronyms, they can be on there, but make sure you define them right after you write them. Not everybody is going to know what you mean. It might mean something different in a different agency or in a different company. So make sure you do define those. And bring a copy of your resume for each panel member to the final hiring manager interview. All right. So the next page are just some resources that we did put together that we felt were very helpful. It's overwhelming if you go online and type in resume writing tips and tricks. There's pages upon pages upon pages. So, we went through and looked at a lot of different pages to come up with these as some of our top recommendations in terms of how to write a resume checklist, skills to list. There's even if you look right here, there's a website that does free resume building. So that's great. This one breaks down good and bad resumes, want to see the differences, and then just some things to avoid on your resume. And then Blue Star Family does have the employment toolkit that will also help you with that. So the next is hard skills versus soft skills. What are some good ones to list on your resumes? The differences between hard and soft skills. Some interviewing tips, again, job interview tips, how to ace an internal interview if you are interviewing for a position within the company you're already in. 12 interview moves that'll lose you the job faster than you can send a thank you note. How to answer tell me about a time questions. Again, that will go back to that STAR theory that we talked about. Just being in detail and making sure to hit the whole picture. And then 12 surprising things people forgot during job interviews. That one's actually kind of funny. And then, so some networking. These are some tips on networking through LinkedIn. And then the Blue Star Families Careers Program, which trains and inspires military spouses and helps you just kind of really find your career and help you to achieve success.
Laura, can I add something to that?
You sure can.
We've also recently partnered with Hire Heroes USA to help spouses with their resumes, and it's completely free to you. But if you go to our careers page, you'll find that resource on there, and you'll be able to upload your resume and put your information through there, and somebody will contact you and give you some one-on-one support, which is fantastic. And it's really great. So taking advantage of that. And we have other career resources on our pages too, in addition to local events that happen all around in-person events. And it looks like Kelly Babs has just shared our resources page in the chat box if you want to click on there and save it for later to review. But we offer lots of different opportunities for you guys to get involved. And we actually, in San Diego, California, and in Jacksonville, Florida, we have career managers on the ground to help connect some of those military spouses to positions in those communities, and we hope to expand to other communities here in the future. So just keep your eyes and ears open for those opportunities.
Great. So that was the entire presentation. We definitely would love to hear any questions at this point, address any questions. If you're not comfortable jumping in with questions or you want to have a one-off conversation, I did leave our military recruiting email address here. So you can feel free to reach out with any questions. Ashley's email is also here. And I know that she would be more than open and willing to address any questions that you might have after the fact. But we would love to chat more if any of you would like to.
And if I don't know the answer, I will pass you on to our careers coordinator, Liz Jones, who has joined us as well. And she'll help you to guide you to some of the resources that we have to best fit your needs. So. Great. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box. We'll wait a couple minutes and before we log off.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Laura, too. We truly appreciate Best Buy helping us do this and bringing in your expertise to provide this to military spouses and in making an impact in their lives. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited. My pleasure.
And I'm going to put her email address down in the chat box as well if you guys want to email her or myself. Well, thank you.
Bye.